Keir Starmer's rise to power as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom marked a significant turning point for the Labour Party. After years in opposition and facing the aftermath of Brexit, Starmer's victory symbolised a return to power for Labour. His tenure began with high hopes for economic reform, public sector rejuvenation, and the promise of a more progressive, transparent government. However, within the first few weeks of his premiership, scandals began to surface, overshadowing his initial achievements. Among these controversies, one of the most significant was the issue of unprecedented gift donations, which would soon become a defining feature of his early weeks in office. In this deep dive, we will explore how these donations stirred controversy, provoked public and media outrage, and led to political inquiry into Starmer's leadership. We will contextualize the scandal within broader questions of ethics and transparency, offering a detailed analysis of the implications of the largest gift donations to a politician in the UK's history. The gift donation scandal, a financial storm. The most notable scandal to emerge during Starmer's early premiership involved gift donations, raising questions about the propriety of political financing. Records revealed that Starmer had received the largest individual political donations ever recorded in the UK. These donations totaled a staggering amount, eclipsing those of his predecessors and triggering significant concern among political analysts and the public alike. The scope of the donations. The donations in question came from a mix of private individuals, corporate interests, and philanthropic organisations. While it's common for political figures to receive support from donors, the scale of Starmer's financial backing was unprecedented. This wasn't just a routine influx of campaign contributions. Many of these donations were categorised as gifts, a term that carries certain ethical and legal implications. By the time the full figures were disclosed, the total value of gifts exceeded any previously recorded donations to a British politician. Key questions began to surface. Who were the donors? Were these legitimate supporters of Labour's policy agenda, or were there hidden motivations behind these gifts? Why were these gifts given? What expectations or obligations might Starmer face as a result of accepting such large sums? What are the legal and ethical limits of gift donations to politicians in the UK? Origins of the donations, unpacking the scandal. One of the most contentious aspects of this scandal was the source of the donations. Investigations revealed that many of the gifts came from wealthy business figures and multinational corporations, raising fears of potential conflicts of interest. A portion of the donations was linked to industries such as finance, pharmaceuticals, and technology, areas in which government regulation plays a crucial role. Critics argued that the acceptance of these gifts created an uncomfortable closeness between Starmer's administration and powerful corporate entities. The role of political patronage. These donations led to accusations of political patronage, the idea that Starmer's benefactors might receive preferential treatment or access to government contracts in exchange for their contributions. The optics were particularly damaging for Starmer, whose campaign had emphasised integrity, fairness, and the end of money politics. Yet the sheer size of the donations cast a shadow over these promises. Media and public reaction, a growing crisis. As news of the donations spread, the media jumped on the story with intensity. Major newspapers ran investigative pieces detailing the background of some of Starmer's key donors. Tabloids emphasized the juxtaposition between Starmer's message of equality and the massive wealth of his benefactors. The press and opposition politicians began to question whether these donations had influenced Starmer's policy positions. Public outrage and polls. Public opinion began to sour as the scandal grew. Polls conducted in the weeks following the revelations showed a significant drop in Starmer's approval ratings. Many voters who had backed Labour for its working-class values felt betrayed by what appeared to be a cosy relationship between Starmer's government and the business elite. Starmer's reputation as a principled, rules-based leader, a former Director of Public Prosecutions, DPP, was undermined by the perception that he had accepted questionable financial support. In particular, left-leaning factions within Labour, many of whom had been sceptical of Starmer's more centrist policies, were outraged. For them, this scandal represented a betrayal of Labour's progressive values. Legal and ethical questions arise. Where does the law stand? The legal framework surrounding political donations in the UK is designed to prevent undue influence over elected officials. However, it became clear that gifts, as opposed to standard campaign donations, fall into a more ambiguous legal category. While there are caps on direct contributions to political campaigns, gifts, especially if made to a politician in their personal capacity, are subject to less scrutiny. Regulatory loopholes became evident. Many of the donations to Starmer were classified as personal gifts, which allowed them to bypass the stricter regulations applied to political contributions. Critics quickly pointed out that this loophole undermined the integrity of the system, allowing wealthy individuals to exert influence without transparency. The scandal sparked renewed calls for reform of the UK's political donation laws. Labour's opposition and independent watchdogs called for an inquiry into how such donations were regulated and whether Starmer's administration had violated any ethical guidelines. There were also questions about whether there was a need to reform the way gifts are declared and the transparency required around them. Starmer's response: damage control. In the face of growing criticism, Starmer was quick to address the issue publicly. His team released a statement clarifying that all donations were received in compliance with UK law and that any gifts would be transparently recorded. However, this response did little to quell the controversy. Denials of favouritism. Starmer denied any suggestion of impropriety or favouritism toward the donors. In several interviews, he reiterated that his government was committed to serving the interests of the British people, not wealthy elites. He also emphasised that Labour's policies, especially around healthcare, education, and the economy, remained unchanged despite the donations, refusing to return the money. Despite calls from some within his own party to return the money, Starmer chose not to. His rationale was that the donations were made legally, and to return them would be an admission of wrongdoing. This decision, however, only fanned the flames of the controversy, as it left critics questioning why Starmer was so determined to keep the funds. The gift donation scandal was damaging not just to Starmer, but also to the broader image of the Labour Party. Labour had traditionally been seen as the party of the working class, while the Conservatives were often associated with big business and corporate interests. The revelation that Labour's leader had accepted such large gifts created a narrative that Labour under Starmer had moved away from its roots and was now in the pocket of powerful donors. Internal party tensions. The fallout from the scandal deepened existing divisions within the Labour Party. The party's left-wing faction, many of whom were already disillusioned with Starmer's centrist leadership, seized on the scandal as evidence that Starmer had abandoned the core values of the party. Some even began to call for Starmer's resignation, arguing that his continued leadership would irreparably damage Labour's credibility. Long-term consequences: can Starmer recover? While the scandal had an immediate impact on Starmer's popularity and Labour's polling, the long-term effects were less clear. Some political analysts suggested that the scandal might have been damaging in the short term, but would be forgotten over time as new issues took centre stage. Others, however, believed that the donation scandal could become a defining moment of Starmer's premiership, shaping public perception of him as a politician who was too closely aligned with the rich and powerful. The gift donation scandal marked a critical moment in Keir Starmer's early days as Prime Minister. It raised serious questions about the role of money in politics, the influence of wealthy donors, and the ethics of political leadership. While Starmer's government survived the immediate fallout, the scandal left lasting scars on his reputation and that of the Labour Party. As Starmer continues to navigate the challenges of leadership, the shadow of this scandal will remain, a reminder of the delicate balance between political power and public trust.